Computer role-playing games were popularized in Japan in the early and mid-1980s due to groundbreaking Western PC titles like Wizardry and Ultima, as well as homegrown efforts from developers such as T&E Soft, Kogado, and Nihon Falcom. The RPG genre soon became firmly established as a part of the Japanese gaming landscape, but its popularity would absolutely explode in 1986 with the debut of NX's Dragon Quest for the Nintendo Family Computer. A truly trailblazing title, Dragon Quest's success led to a boom period for RPGs in Japan, paving the way for Squaresoft's Final Fantasy, Sega's Phantasy Star, and countless other role-playing adventures domestically and abroad. The steadily increasing demand for more RPGs from consumers, as well as the rapidly advancing computer technology of the late 80s, would play its part in the creation of another innovative and important entry in the history of role-playing games.
全部が初めてのことなんで、ゲームで声が出るとか、ちょっとアニメ的な映像が出るとか、ビジュアル系のロールプレイングとかいう初めてのことだらけなんで、誰もやったことないものをみんなでああでもないこうでもないっていう苦労して作り出したっていう初めてのことをみんなでやった思い出があります。
That game is Hudson Soft's 1989 Tengai Makyou ZIRIA for the PC Engine, and this is the story of the who, what, when, where, why, and how of the world's first RPG on CD. The PC Engine hit Japanese store shelves on October 30th, 1987, the result of a partnership between Japanese electronics giant NEC and the game developer Hudson Soft. Early on, the new system impressed the Japanese public with the compact, eye-catching looks of both the console itself and its proprietary hue cards, the sleek credit card-sized ROM cartridges that housed its software. However, it's what's inside that really wowed consumers, as the PC Engine's 16-bit graphical processing units allowed its games to include larger sprites and more colorful graphics than what had been seen on Nintendo's Famicom, the established leader in the console gaming market in Japan and North America. NEC and Hudson's new home gaming platform was a hit, and despite failing in other markets, the PC Engine would hold on to a large share of the Japanese console space until the mid-1990s, playing second only to Nintendo for the next two gaming generations. The PC Engine found success thanks to a library of unique and critically acclaimed games. However, that is only one component of why the console remained a strong competitor in Japan for its nearly 7-year run. Another key reason why the PC Engine did so well was the ongoing innovations made to the product. Years before the release of Sega's Mega Drive in 1988, and even longer before Nintendo made any announcements regarding an inevitable follow-up to the Famicom, NEC and Hudson started making plans for the PC Engine to evolve and stand out from the competition, present and future. The PC Engine's 8-bit CPU and hue card medium were serviceable for the time, but the system's limitations would soon put it at a severe disadvantage against its more high-tech rivals. To level the playing field, the two companies went in a completely new and radical direction in the industry, deciding to invest in the development of an add-on to the existing PC Engine hardware that would allow it to play games on a format that had yet to be utilized for gaming: the optical compact disc. CDs were a relatively new invention, hitting the market in 1982 as a superior way to play recorded music when compared to cassette tapes and vinyl records. CD-ROM technology was introduced a couple of years later for use with personal computers, with the ability to store hundreds of times more data than floppy disks, tapes, and cartridges. NEC and Hudson Soft were determined to be the first to take advantage of this new medium for video games, working toward that goal as early as 1985, quite some time before the design for the standard PC Engine was even complete. The result of years of research and development was the CD-ROM system, which would attach a disk drive to the original PC Engine console through an attaché case-like interface unit. with the added ability of outputting video and audio through composite, a marked improvement over the original system's RF configuration. This peripheral add-on came out at the tail end of 1988 on December 4th, launching alongside 2 games: the virtual dating simulator Noriko, and a port of Capcom's original Street Fighter, renamed Fighting Street. Both titles took advantage of the expanded audio capabilities of the compact disc format, but not much else. To really show the public how CD-ROMs could and would be the future of gaming, Hudson had to develop a game that could provide an experience that could only be achieved on CD and really show off the medium's capabilities. Fortunately, by the time the CD-ROM had launched, work was already underway on such a project, a role-playing game that aimed to be unlike anything that came out before it. By the time the PC Engine was created, Hudson Soft had already accumulated years of experience developing popular games in-house for various computer and home console platforms. Most of these were simple action titles or platformers such as Adventure Island, but among them were more complicated projects like the 1987 hit Famicom RPG, Momotaro Densetsu. While the company had a staff of talented and reliable programmers and engineers, Hudson wanted to work with creative concepts that were beyond what they had done or were capable of, to design a game on an epic scale that felt similar to a popular anime in the 1980s. In order to accomplish that, Hudson brought in Teruhisa Hiroi, known as Hiroi Oji or Prince Hiroi, to lead such a project. While just starting out in the anime and gaming sphere at the time, Hiroi Oji would become a hugely influential multi-creator in Japan, starting up Red Company, known as Red Entertainment today, producing some of the most well-known franchises in the nation, perhaps most notably the multimedia and cultural phenomenon Sakura Taisen. The partnership between Mr. Hiroi and Hudson came about from the former's work as co-creator of the television anime Mashin Eiyu Den Wataru, known as Spirit Hero Wataru in international markets. Sometime before the show hit Japanese televisions in the April of 1988, he met with Hudson higher-ups hoping to gain a sponsor in the company. The meeting went well, with Hudson even agreeing to publish a PC Engine game based on the license, which would come out in the fall of 1988, released the following year in North America as Keith Courage and Alpha Zones, a pack-in title for the TurboGrafx 16. Aside from that, Mr. Hiroi was also offered to head up the development of a game, as Hudson was impressed by his contributions to Wataru, as well as the success he attained with Nekros no Yosai, or the Fortress of Neklos, a candy line that started in 1987, which included figurines and cards, allowing children to play a sort of fantasy role-playing game. Although he had never worked on a video game before, Mr. Hiroi had experience with gaming ideas and terminology from his previous projects, and was highly interested in the potential of games as a medium for storytelling. Hiroi Oji already had a vision for the game, based on an idea he originally intended for a live-action or animated movie in 1986. The story would be set in the Golden Land of Jipang, a fictional country based on Japan but full of long-held misconceptions and stereotypes the outside world had about Japanese culture and history. The name Jipang itself is an example of this, as it's an old European word for Japan originating from 13th century Italian explorer Marco Polo's observations. The term Jipang, or its variation Zipangu, is also most likely why the East Asian nation is called Japan around the world, since natives call their country Nihon or Nippon. Regarding the game itself, the overall concept would be a video game adaptation of the writings of an American-born scholar and researcher named Paul Hieronymus Chada, more commonly known as P.H. Chada. Utterly fascinated with ancient Japanese history and mythology, he penned a novel called Far East of Eden, ZIRIA, telling the fantastic tales and adventures from a country called Jipang, as seen through the eyes of a foreign missionary. If this all sounds pretty nonsensical, that's because it is, since there is no such person named P.H. Chada. Rather, Hiroi Oji worked with friend and Red Company co-founder Hiroshi Adachi to develop the story, characters, settings, and scenarios for his ideas. It's most likely that the moniker P.H. Chada was decided on as a combination of the two writers' names, P.H. standing for Prince Hiroi, and Chada being similar to Adachi spelled backwards. With story writing duties set, Red Company needed one more key member of the creative team before they could really get to work on their new game project. Someone who could bring the people, landscapes, and history of Japan to life visually in a unique and appealing way. And in 1987, by fate or by mere coincidence, they found him.
Tsujino Yoshiteru です。天外魔境における役割なんですけど、キャラクターデザインと作品全体のコンセプト、目に映るものをどういう形にするかみたいなコンセプトデザインをやっておりました。
At the time, Mr. Tsujino was an animator at Telecom Animation Film, a subsidiary of the famous anime studio Tokyo Movie Shinsha, where he mainly worked on foreign commissions such as Disney's DuckTales. Dissatisfied with the style and content of their current work, he and a few co-workers came together to propose an animation project they'd find more satisfaction with, a fantasy anime set in Japan. While they lobbied to get this project approved, another colleague happened to have a meeting with Hudson Soft around that time to explore opportunities to work on projects together, taking some of Mr. Tsujino's sketches for the proposal with him. It just so happened that Hiroi Oji was also at those talks.
そこで僕たちが作ってたアニメ映画の作品の絵と出会って、今回ハドソンで作る CD-ROM のゲームにこのキャラ使おうぜみたいな話になっちゃって、それで巻き込まれたという形ですね。企画書に書いた主人公なんですけど、まあいろんな絵あるんですけどね。バラバラと。この主人公の絵を広井王子がちょっと気に入って、これを、今回の天外魔境の主人公であるジライアにしたいと。
Mr. Hiroi gave the young artist the nickname Torajirou, and together with Mr. Adachi, the three of them continued on with the creative planning for Tengai Makyou ZIRIA. Two ideas based on Japanese fantasy originally intended for animation projects came together and would now serve to create what would arguably be Hudson's biggest game to date. Mr. Hiroi's ideas were grand, and he worried about whether or not they could all be included in a video game. By the time Mr. Tsujino was brought on board, the decision to put the game on CD had already been made. Reassured by Hudson Soft that the new technology would allow all their ideas to be realized, the creative team at Red Company started putting together the game as they saw fit, without having to worry much about limitations.
広井王子に言われたのは、映画を作ろうと。ゲームというメディアだけど、それで新しいゲームの、形を、これで作ろうではないかみたいなことを言われまして、映画を作るつもりで、参加しました。
However, despite having the extensive space of a compact disc, they ran into many technical problems in making their vision a video game reality due to various memory limitations of the new hardware, as well as most of the programming team having to learn the ins and outs of CD-ROM technology as they moved along with the project. Some of the major players of Hudson's development staff included company veteran Shinichi Nakamoto, who served as producer, and Satoshi Mikami and Kenji Kikuchi filling in as the game's main programmers. Mr. Nakamoto, who is considered the father of Bomberman and would have a storied career at Hudson in the years to come, was also general manager of technology and worked closely with the engineers developing the CD-ROM attachment. Mr. Mikami and Mr. Kikuchi were both established and capable employees who would also be heavily involved with the company moving forward. Still images and video of the game would be shown to the public as early as 1987 to build up hype for the game and the CD-ROM system, showing theoretically what the new technology could achieve in gaming. A lot of what was presented, however, would change significantly over the game's development cycle. Prototype footage showed an action-oriented role-playing battle system, and character models in towns and exploration sections looked closer to Mr. Tsujino's artwork than what would be used in the final game. The super deformed style that was the norm for most RPGs in the 80s and 90s. Red Company and Hudson's initial ambitions for Tengai Makyou had to be scaled back quite a bit during production, and the game system would be overhauled several times. Mr. Tsujino recalls a few things they had tried to include in the game.
ちょっとした人も全員別々の顔がある。そして敵が出てきた時はモーションをしてアニメーションで戦うという風なことで始めて、絵も描いたんですけどね、結局うまくいかなかったというのがありますけど、
Aside from the technical issues, the lack of experience Red Company had in creating scenarios in an RPG also became a roadblock to progress. Hiroi Oji reached out to someone at Hudson Soft with experience in the role-playing genre, the creator of Momotaro Densetsu, Mr. Akira Sakuma. The two were actually friends who had attended the same university, so it was an easy call for both to work together. Eventually, Mr. Sakuma would bring in another person to essentially save the project, a rookie who had assisted him with Momotaro Densetsu.
足立さんなんかと一緒に作って、一旦ゲームとしての形にはなったんですけど、この形ではゲームとして売れないというか、これじゃダメだという風なことを言われまして、新たに増田昌司氏、天外魔境2の監督をした増田さんという方が呼び出されて、これをもっと分かりやすく売れる形のゲームとして、作り直してほしいという形で、いろいろ手直しされたんですね。
Though his name does not appear in the game's end credits, Shoji Masuda was tasked with drastically reworking much of the game near the final stages of development, including many of the game's scenarios and its battle system. Mr. Masuda wasn't actually a Hudson employee at the time, but was instead working for an advertising agency in charge of marketing Tengai Makyou ZIRIA, which explains his absence in the game's staff role. After his work on this title, he would be officially hired by Hudson for a time, though he would forge his own unique path in the industry with RPGs like Linda Cubed. As a CD-based game, a lot of expectations were placed on the audio capabilities of Tengai Makyou ZIRIA. For the voice acting cast, Mr. Hiroi chose talent who were already known in the animation field. These included veterans Kaneto Shiozawa and Takeshi Aono, as well as relative newcomers Hiroko Emori and Mitsuo Iwata. Iwata being most well known at this point for portraying main character Kaneda in the 1988 film Akira. For the game's music, Hiroi enlisted Ryuichi Sakamoto to compose part of the soundtrack. Mr. Sakamoto was a big name in the music world at the time, not just in Japan for his pioneering work in electronic music, but internationally as a respected composer for films, winning the British Academy of Film and Television Arts Award for Best Original Music in 1982 for the soundtrack of Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, as well as the 1988 American Academy Award for Best Original Score for his work on The Last Emperor, which won multiple awards that year, including Best Picture and Best Director. The selection of notable names for voice acting and music was by design, of course, not only to add to the quality of the game, but to leave an impression in the minds of magazine readers by giving them a clearer idea of how the game would sound. After many months of hard work, dedication, and a fair share of trial and tribulation, Tengai Makyou ZIRIA was finally complete and ready to ship. The world's first role-playing adventure on CD-ROM was published on June 30th, 1989 for the manufacturer's suggested retail price of 7,200 yen plus tax. The game was pressed on one disc held in a double CD jewel case, the cover featuring an arrangement of kanji characters and symbols drawn by Mr. Tsujino. The package continued a tradition of role-playing games, particularly those on personal computers, by including a lot of extra information and a few bonus items. Rather than showing images and providing descriptions of the game, the reverse side cover is actually a prism sticker of the game's 3 protagonists. Inside there are more stickers representing paper seals used in the game's story, with a note claiming that adhering them to the CD-ROM system will improve gameplay. The main reason ZIRIA comes in a double case is its 72-page instruction manual, which includes a mini manga that sets up the story, colorful artwork and images, as well as info on just about everything the game has to offer. Perhaps the most interesting part of the booklet is the Making of ZIRIA section at the end, which introduces many of the key development staff from Red Company and Hudson, putting a spotlight on both the creative and technical sides of production. The name Tengai Makyou was most likely derived as a play on a series of Japanese literary works called Jingai Makyou, with Far East of Eden similarly taken from the classic Western novel East of Eden. Tengai Makyou can be translated to English as The Realm of Devils Far from Heaven, and the backstory of the game provides a hint as to why that title was chosen. The country of Japan was blessed with abundant nature, prosperity, and peace, but that suddenly came to an end when the demon lord Masakado ravaged the land and threatened to bring Japan into an age of darkness. When it seemed none could withstand his destructive ambitions, a band of brave warriors stood up to him, fighting a war that lasted 100 days. These were the proud members of the Fire Clan, who became the saviors of Jipang when they defeated the Dark Lord, sealing away his corrupt soul, restoring peace to their nation. Fast forward 1,000 years, sometime in the 1700s and somewhere in the Bando region of Jipang. The country has thrived for centuries since the Great War, but if history teaches anything, good times never last forever, and recently a mysterious cult calling themselves the Daimonkyo has spread across Jipang from lands abroad, attracting both noblemen and commoner alike with their teachings. This religious movement is a front for a much darker scheme, which is to resurrect Masakado so he may lay siege to Jipang once again. A young descendant of the Fire Clan, Jiraiya, learns of this history and current situation from the leader of his tribe, the Toad Hermit, and is sent out on a journey to unite with 2 other descendants of the Fire Clan, recover the 3 holy orbs used by their ancestors to seal away Masakado, and put an end to the ambitions of the Daimon cult.
オイラにマサカドってやつが倒せるのか？
おそらく無理じゃろ。
だったらなんでオイラは今まで修行してきたんだよ。
お前一人では無理だということじゃ。しかしお前と同じ定めを持った者があと2人を。この2人と力を合わせればマサカドの復活を阻止することができるじゃろ。
冗談じゃねえよ。マサカドなんてやつ、オイラ一人で十分だよ。
ならば行ってこい。しかし火の一族2人と力を合わせねばマサカドには立ち向かえぬぞ。
The player then takes control of Jiraiya as he embarks on his quest. Mr. Tsujino describes the young hero.
炎のように熱い熱血感っていう感じですね。
True to those words full of gust and gusto, Jiraiya feels like he can complete this quest on his own. The Bando region is a huge area split up into 9 provinces, each of which contain villages, castles, dungeons, and other explorable locales. Bando is Jipang's equivalent to Japan's Kanto, which includes the capital city, Tokyo. An interesting thing about the shape of Jipang is that it's based on the oldest map ever constructed of Japan in the West. Gameplay and game progression in Tengai Makyou ZIRIA is remarkably similar to other RPGs of the era. For example, players can select from a menu of different commands to interact with the environment, which allows them to do things like inspect items or speak with NPCs. Some villagers will have animated portraits that play as they speak, but these instances are few and far between outside of story-relevant characters. Danger lurks in many of the fields, forests, and caves that surround civilization, and battles take place randomly in unsafe areas. Battle mode gives the player a first-person perspective of the action and mostly allows for the typical set of options found in role-playing games, such as attack, defend, and flee. However, Jiraiya can also steal from his foes, something that wasn't so common back then, and this option is even used in a clever way at one point to defeat a gold-hoarding boss character. While there is some movement in battles, unfortunately most enemies are just static sprites, with animations reserved for boss characters and a handful of common monsters. The encounter rate is fairly high, and battles can drag out a little due to the slow scrolling text, but the ability to put the battle on auto helps ease these problems somewhat. The player must always ensure HP levels are high, because if Jiraiya or any one of his companions fall in the fight, they are returned to the location of the last save and lose half of their money. After a battle is won, experience and ryo, the currency used in Jipang, are gained. Experience is of course necessary to level up and become stronger, and ryo can be spent in town for items and equipment or at places like the inn or gambling house. Fighting monsters isn't the only way to level up, since completing major events and side quests also rewards the player with a sizable amount of bonus experience. Jiraiya has a long and perilous journey ahead, and he runs into trouble only a few steps in, as he is deceived by a tanuki trickster posing as a descendant of the Fire Clan who looks almost identical to the young hero. In the end, the incident works out in Jiraiya's favor, but it helps him realize that this mission won't be quite so simple and easy, and he will need real friends if he hopes to survive. Thankfully, he won't be completely alone for long, and he runs into one of the toads of his tribe named Kogama, or Small Toad, who offers to accompany Jiraiya. This little guy randomly attacks during battles and can also warp the party to one of the many small settlements overseen by a large man named Kumogiri, a boss of a band of thieves and a friend of the Toad Hermit and the Fire Clan. It's fortunate Kogama found Jiraiya when he did, because it wouldn't be long until one of the 13 leaders of the Daimon cult, Goemon, reveals himself to the hero. Though he seems like a normal, if not nefarious man at first, like most of his fellow Daimon generals, he uses that form to conceal his true, monstrous identity. It turns out that the Daimon cult has been kidnapping its adherents and other people throughout the country, submitting their captives to gruesome torture and stealing their souls for the resurrection of Masakado. They perform this task without mercy nor remorse, their dedication unwavering to their cause and its founder, Jashinsai.
そもそもは、邪神祭というね、人物が、世界中回って魔術なり何なりを極めたいとやって中東の方へ行って悪魔なり何なりそういうのと出会って魔術を得るんですけど、そこで見入られるんですね。バール大門という。でもって彼を引き連れて、ジパングを、当時のジパングというのは昔いた鬼なり妖怪なりそういう人たちがいたジパングではないジパングになってて、後から入ってきた人間が支配している世界だったんですよね。そこを昔のようにそういう昔にいたジパングにいた人たちの世界にしようとバール大門の力を使って、そして日本を転覆して自分たちの世界にしてやるぞというような人たちですね。
しまった、甘く見たわ。だが13人衆の残りが必ずお前を倒す。必ずな。
The fight that ensues with Gomon pushes Jiraiya to his limits. However, he emerges victorious. Shortly after the clash, he meets up with a young girl whom he was destined to unite with, a fellow descendant of the Fire Clan.
お日様のようにニコニコ明るくて、でもまあちょっと太陽が曇る時もあっておセンチになるかなという可愛いほっとけないやんちゃな女の子みたいな感じですね。
Tsunade's strength and skill with an axe are a welcome addition to the party, but her great physical power is offset by her inability to use magic, as she is unable to read the scrolls necessary to cast spells. She cannot steal like Jiraiya, and instead has a special command where she pretends to cry in order to invoke panic in a foe, though that never seems to actually happen. She hails from the Slug tribe, whereas Jiraiya is part of the Toad tribe. Only one more member of the Fire Clan must be found, Orochimaru from the Snake tribe. While searching for this third Fire Clan descendant, the heroes will cross paths with a variety of people, making new friends and allies on the way. Many of them will aid the heroes in some way in order to overcome the many obstacles the Daimon cult has placed on the path forward. Swordmasters invite Jiraiya to face them in combat where they pass on their unique sword techniques. All throughout the land, gods in the form of white spirit animals have been trapped and sealed away by the cult, and when freed, award Jiraiya with a useful item, often a scroll that allows him to cast the magic spell. The king of the ogres, Akuro, joins the fight for a short while to reclaim his kidnapped son from one of the cult's commanders. One of the more eccentric people in Japan that the party will rendezvous with from time to time is Hotei Maru, an odd but kind and knowledgeable foreign missionary whose appearance and way of speaking are very much out of place in Japan. He proves to be a valuable friend time and time again, and it's this man whose observations are chronicled in the imaginary novel Far East of Eden. When Jiraiya and Tsunade finally meet the elusive Orochimaru, he is disguised as a beautiful woman and reveals himself only after they recover the sacred orb of the Snake tribe. But rather than join the other Fire Clan descendants right then and there, he denies his destiny and runs off. His reluctance is due to the loyalty and obligations he has to the man who raised him, the great shogun of Edo, who has been seduced into joining the Daimon cult.
オロチマルはやっぱりクールなんだけど内面にいろいろ悩みを抱えているような複雑なキャラクターかなという。
The two must continue on without the shogun's ninja, who asks to be given time to consider the path he will take. During this time, Orochimaru does keep an eye on the heroes and even provides help along the way. While continuing on their mission, one of the cult leaders Jiraiya and Tsunade encounter is a foolish ape with a proclivity for women and wine named Manto, who would become a recurring antagonist in the Tengai Makyou games to come, responsible for some of the more memorable scenes in later entries. Finally, in their hour of need, Orochimaru accepts his fate and makes the decision to join his fellow Fire Clan descendants, helping them acquire the Slug Orb. His weapon of choice is a bow, and he has access to a range of useful attack and support magic, as well as a special command where he gives a sidelong glance, which has a very slim chance of taking out an enemy for good. With the descendants now united and holding 2 of the 3 Fire Clan orbs, the time has come to recover the final orb and end the Daimon cult's campaign of terror. The trio makes for an extremely effective team, and just as things are looking up with their goals seemingly within reach, everything takes a turn for the worse. Tsunade and Orochimaru are captured, leaving Jiraiya to continue on his own to save them. A priest named Namagusa offers to assist the young man, but even then, the power of the Daimon proves too overwhelming, and the young Toad Tribe warrior finds himself at his lowest point in the journey. Stripped of his possessions, including the sacred orbs, he is taken to Gokumonto, the island of Hell's Gate, tossed into its damp and dingy dungeons. Despite losing many of its leaders, the cult has not been as weakened as one might think, as the dungeon is quite populated with prisoners, some of whom are Jiraiya's friends and allies, locked away to be harvested for Masakado's revival. He soon reunites with Tsunade, as well as the missionary Hotemaru, who informs them that he was forced to help the enemy construct a mighty army of mechanical giant soldiers due to his knowledge of engineering. These soldiers guard the island and pose too great of a threat for any mortal to stand up against, especially those who are unarmed like Jiraiya and his imprisoned friends, making escape impossible. However, the odd foreigner is secretly harboring something these menacing machines are no match for: a clay robo. This tiny ornament is actually a sacred guardian created by the gods that can grow larger and wield immense power, enough to destroy the machine soldiers with ease. Thanks to this clay robo, the 3 heroes are eventually able to escape the island. But the robot doesn't make the journey, as its one weakness is water, and it tragically dissolves in the ocean. Their resolve strengthened from the second chance, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Orochimaru make their way to the province of Musashi, home of the capital city of Edo, to put an end to the Daimon cult and their evil plans to destroy Japan once and for all, or die trying. The entirety of Tengai Makyou ZIRIA will most likely take over 30 hours or so to complete on a first attempt. Exploration of the large game area and fully voiced story segments account for a good chunk of that. However, players can expect to grind for levels at several points in the game. While not one of the more difficult early RPGs, it certainly presents a challenge with its battles as well as figuring out how to overcome a few of its more clever or ambiguous scenarios. The music is catchy and memorable, but tracks are typically on the short side and repeat often. Ryuichi Sakamoto only composed a total of 3 songs for the game, which are its only fully orchestrated pieces. The story is quite serious with many touching moments, but there is also a lot of humor sprinkled in throughout, which was uncommon for RPGs at the time. What was also uncommon was basing an RPG on Japanese myths and history, since most games in the genre were inspired and centered around medieval Western concepts and themes, including those made by Japanese developers. An old Japanese tale that Tengai Makyou draws a lot of inspiration from in particular is The Legend of Jiraiya, where the toad, slug, and snake motifs, as well as the 3 main characters' names, are derived. The classic tale of Jiraiya has been adapted into movies and influenced all sorts of Japanese media, especially anime and video games. Regarding his decisions for Tengai Makyou's themes, Hiroi Oji explains the idea process in a 1992 Super Famicom magazine article.
If you investigate Japan's ancient religions, you'll find there are many things still shrouded in mystery there. It got me thinking, what if, long ago, there was some event or something that erased all that history? There's a dynamism to the flow of history. Tengai Makyou was my way of trying to express that. As entertainment, I know those deeper aspects of the game are easily obscured, but the humor also acts like the sugarcoating of a pill, a way to make the truths go down easier. It's also something for adults to enjoy too.
Tengai Makyou ZIRIA was promoted heavily before and after its release, presented as a showcase title for the PC Engine CD-ROM system. The big names attached to the product, the excitement of what new technology could bring to the gaming experience, and the promise of a huge adventure unlike anything else all made the game a financial success. However, the final revision of the game would end up very different from what was shown in many previews, due to the issues mentioned earlier. A lot of the more ambitious features and ideas would ultimately be left on the cutting room floor.
スムーズにゲームが動くようにするためにメモリを軽くしなきゃいけないとか、締め切りがあってその期間内にまとめなきゃいけないっていうので、かなりカットされてますね、ジライアは。小説では足立さんが、その辺を書いてると。
Such cut content can be found in a collection of fully voiced and animated scenes that play after enough time is spent idling on the game's start screen. The novelization mentioned would be published at the end of 1989 through late 1990 in 3 parts by Kadokawa, which includes some fantastic new artwork from Mr. Tsujino and credits to P.H. Chada's supposedly original work from 1982. The story presented in these novels is much more complex than that of the games, to the point where it's essentially a completely different take on the tale. While it was disappointing that the original vision of the teams at Red Company and Hudson Soft had to be altered and watered down significantly, Tengai Makyou ZIRIA was also a critical success, garnering positive reviews in Japanese gaming publications at the time. Though gameplay and the look of overworld and battle sections didn't stand out much from what was currently on the market, the voice acting, animation, refreshing art and story themes, along with its likable cast of characters, would leave a lasting impression. In addition to the novels, an adventure book based on the game was also published in 1989, something common for popular video games in the 80s and 90s. And in July of 1990, 1 year after the game's release, a 2-part VHS OVA, or original video animation, hit store shelves in Japan, fulfilling Hiroi Oji and Yoshiteru Tsujino's original desires for their ideas to be realized as animated movies. Produced by Kadokawa, Takara, and Tokyo Movie Shinsha, each volume has a runtime of 50 minutes, and while the characters are the same found in the PC Engine title, with the principal cast's voice actors reprising their roles, the animation story is only loosely based on the source material. Tengai Makyou ZIRIA would be ported to a variety of different platforms over the years, the first being for the CD-ROM successor, the PC Engine Super CD-ROM system that debuted in 1992. This was a not-for-sale promotional item that was given away in limited numbers to customers of the PC Engine Duo system and is identical in content to the standard CD-ROM release. The original game would also be included in a PSP release compiling all of the PC Engine's retail Tengai Makyou games in 2008, and available for download on the PlayStation Network in 2010. An enhanced edition of the game with updated graphics and sounds, minus voice acting, was published for several Japanese cell phone carriers in the mid-2000s, but the most substantial re-release of them all is the 2006 3D remake for the Xbox 360, titled Tengai Makyou ZIRIA, Haruka Naru Jipang, or The Distant Jipang. It deviates from the original greatly, as its story is more in line with Red Company's original vision for the game, similar to the novels. Opinions on this reimagining are divided among fans. However, it's one of the more difficult to find titles on the 360, commanding rather high prices on the second-hand market. Like the other releases mentioned, this game remained Japan exclusive. However, Western publisher Gaijin Works started on an English localization that was ultimately scrapped due to a number of factors, including Microsoft's strict publishing policies. The 360 version of ZIRIA would also see its own mobile port in 2010, presented in a style that resembles the original game. The production of Tengai Makyou ZIRIA was a roller coaster of emotions and hard work for the staff at Red Company and Hudson Soft, but in the end their efforts resulted in a product they could all be proud of. Mr. Tsujino takes us back to his feelings at the time.
いろいろね、紆余曲折と言いますか、何度かね、完成しては違うバージョンにした方がいいんじゃないかって言って、また作り直して完成して、それでもまだダメで、増田昌司さんが、いろいろいじくって完成したという作品なんでね、ちょっと複雑な思いもありますけど、でも自分たちで苦労してやったものが、製品として世に出たっていうのがね、 非常に嬉しかったですね。で、あと雑誌なんかにもいろいろね、登場して自分の絵なんかも出て、非常に嬉しかったですね、当時は。はい。
It's been over 3 decades since the release of Tengai Makyou ZIRIA, and while it may not be as well known as a Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy, it firmly has its place in the history of RPGs, not only as the genre's first CD-based game, but for laying the groundwork for what storytelling in a role-playing game would look like in the years to come. While this first experiment would not go as smoothly as anyone involved had hoped, and the end results not quite achieving the high hopes and standards they set, it was a valuable experience that would help Red and Hudson to achieve greater success only 3 years later with the sequel to Tengai Makyou ZIRIA, Tengai Makyou 2, Manji Maru. But that's a story for another time.